Hello. Hello, lovely viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're watching after the broadcast, because we're quite early today, as opposed to our other streams on this particular project, then feel free to, enjoy, travel through time by watching something that happened minutes, hours, days, weeks ago, and watch it in the future. Hello to the future people watching this, and hello to the present people as well. And hello to my guest today, Georgie Morrell, one of my favourite humans in the general universe, not the specific universe. Thank you so much for joining me, Georgie. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, mate. Not too bad. I think I'm coming down with a cold, but I'm usually quite good at stopping them before they take hold. So that's what I'm in the process of doing.
Right. I love how in control of that cold you sound.
Yeah, always.
Show that cold who's boss. And you regularly do show me who's boss, and it is you, and I love you. Um, I'm going to explain a bit more. Well, Georgie will explain a bit more about herself in a second. But first, for anyone watching who hasn't been aware of this project before, we are doing a series. My name's Juliet Burton, and I'm a comedian and a writer and a voiceover and dog walker, barmaid, and a mental health charity ambassador, funnily enough, for the amazing mental health charity, Rethink Mental Illness. And if you are watching this and you want to know more about that charity or any other resources to do with mental health, please do go to the Discord. We have a Discord, and you can explore all the different avenues of loads of books and resources and charities that you can either support or get help from, be supported by yourself on your mental health journey. This project is an Arts Council funded project called Hopepunk, and these videos are a series of videos that we are using to interview people to research and develop what will become a show about it's going to change a lot, but it was originally going to be about trauma recovery, because we've all been through a societal trauma of the pandemic, and I have been through this year a lot of trauma therapy, which I've really needed to do for many years, and then circumstances led to me having I don't like the word breakdown, but I haven't come up with a better one. So I've started calling it my forest fire because of I don't know if that's the best thing to come up with, but the idea that you need to have a fire sometimes to burn the forest down before you can have new regrowth. So that's the kind of vibe. But during these videos, and do go back onto the YouTube channel or onto the Twitch stream to watch the other videos, we've chatted to comedians, we've chatted to TV presenters, we've chatted to mental health ambassadors, and coming up in future streams, we're going to talk to even more comedians and experts on somatic healing and trauma recovery and specific trauma therapies, and all in the name of researching this Arts Council funded show. So Georgie is here today to talk to me because, well, Georgie's an amazing comedian, and we know each other. We've known each other since before the pandemic, since the before times, Georgie. We actually travelled to San Francisco and New York for a job together, didn't we? Ridiculous that we did that.
Yeah, it's hard. It feels like a lifetime ago. It's hard to believe that actually happened once. You could just get on a plane and go somewhere.
And now I'm excited by going to the supermarket. It's just how times have changed.
Say our tips where we can, mate.
Georgie, how would you introduce yourself? Other than, I've just introduced you as my friend, but I'm sure that goes top at your CV and in your biogs. But and how else would you introduce yourself?
Georgie Morrell, and I guess in regards to what we're talking about, I tell you, there's always two different ways I'll introduce myself. For someone like this, I'll say I'm a comedian, actress, writer, disabled advocate, whatever, and all of that. But normally I won't say any of those things if you just meet me in life. Because they're such a sort of big part of my work. I don't always want to talk about them. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And it's like it boxes you in. And I think recently thanks to this therapy I've been doing, it kind of broke down a bit who I was to this kind of, here's just a couple of things that we're now going to start building up of, well, who am I? And I'm not sure how much my work will feature in who I am anymore.
Mm.
You know,
I think as long as it's, I mean, however you introduce yourself, it doesn't really matter, because as long as you know who you are, then fuck what anyone else thinks, really.
yeah. Well, I think that's why I probably went for Georgie's my friend, and I flatter myself I'd love to be counted as one of your friends as well. But yes, you are an amazing comedian. You've done Edinburgh Fringe a number of times,
Mm.
and you are a radio presenter.
Mm-hmm.
You are an amazing friend as well. What's the charity that you're an ambassador for as well?
I'm an ambassador for the Royal Society of Blind Children, and a sort of unofficial ambassador for the RNIB, and an official ambassador for the Wilberforce Trust, based in Yorkshire, all visually impaired charities. I think Wilberforce actually is deaf and visually impaired.
Cool. For anyone who doesn't know you and your work, why are you linked with all of the blind charities, people like charities with blind people?
Because I'm visually impaired. Imagine if I wasn't. It's felt calling. That's an ongoing joke between me and some of my other mates, is that I have just lied for years to have a USP, to stand out and get a freedom pass. I'm visually impaired. I have been since a young age, and I've sort of used it to my advantage in certain ways with work, but also with certain charities, as it just felt like the right thing to do, to be honest, especially for young people.
Yes. Well, we're talking today about I mean, I'm using the word trauma so much, and I'm a bit sick of the word trauma now. But let's call it. Well, I guess the word trauma can mean a lot of different things, and it can be a psychological trauma, which causes actual PTSD with symptoms that are psychological, but it can also be a physical trauma. And I've known you for a number of years, and you and I have spoken about your history, my history, and there's some strange crossovers which I particularly enjoy. For anyone who doesn't know me, I have I was diagnosed with lots of different mental health conditions, but it turns out, having delved a bit deeper, that they are all linked to complex trauma, or developmental trauma. So that's where the actual brain forms based upon formative experiences that informs how your brain, like what parts of your brain light up healthily, what parts of your brain light up unhealthily. I'm very excited that this month I'm going to be going into one of those weird machines that's going to map out my brain, Georgie. So I've got no idea whether it's going to be useful or not, but I'll be able to. It's going to be a different kind of photo shoot to the ones
Oh, stuff that. I just feel like if I did a backfire, the map would come back and they'd be like, "Oh, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
You're the stupidest person we've ever met. Your brain is tiny."
I'm really worried they're going to be like, "We couldn't find anything. We just kept scanning again and again, but there's just..."
It's just a kitten playing with a ball of string. That's all that's there, just back and forth. He's a happy kitten, but just a kitten and a ball of string.
I'm fairly sure that they'll come back with like, "Here's some photographs of your brain," and it's just lots of pictures of David Tennant.
Is he your crush, David Tennant?
He's one of my crushes. Yeah,
one of them. It's we have lists, don't we now?
We do. I know Chris Hemsworth is one of yours. I think Chris Hemsworth might know that he's one of yours now.
Yeah, well, it's surely gotten to him now to stay away from Georgie Morrell. I have a fantasy that one day I will get on the Graham Norton show and he will be one of the other guests. And my fantasy isn't that he sees me and, leaves his wife and kids and marries me. It's just me losing my mind and being speechless for the first time. And just going, "Oh my God."
So your fantasy is to give your mouth a break. That's the fantasy.
And Graham having to ask me to leave because Chris is uncomfortable.
Can't wait to watch that happen. We'll all be tuning in. Georgie, it's good that we're talking about crushes and traumas, but you've had a lot of experiences that many people would probably classify as traumatic. You had a difficult childhood. You were born disabled, right?
Not quite. I was 3 when I was diagnosed with juvenile arthritis. That can lead to complications with your eyesight. Something called uveitis and secondary glaucoma was what kicked in for me by the time I was 4. My arthritis was treated pretty decently. I mean, I've still got it now, and I always will in some way or another. And then the eyes just went absolutely batshit. They were having none of it. I got some of the best care and the best treatment that I could have hoped for. And I was in many ways very lucky and in other ways very unlucky. It just sort of went from, I lost the sight of my left eye in my teens, but both of them sort of immediately took a bit of a battering. I had to have my lenses removed. They couldn't be replaced. There was pressure, build up, scarring, and eventually the left one, it gave up the ghost, and the right one is visually impaired now. But does pretty well considering everything. It's a long medical history that if anybody wants to know more about, do get in touch. But just take my word for it that it took a hell of a kick in. But never underestimate the resilience of eyes or your bodies in any way, shape, or form.
Just a quick hello to Baldy. Thanks for joining in, Baldy. Baldy is one of our regular viewers, Georgie. So thanks, Baldy, for being here. Georgie, there's a couple of things I'd like to pick up on there. Firstly, I made a value judgment in the way that I introduced that topic, which was you had a difficult childhood. Do you think you had a difficult childhood?
No, I had an awesome childhood. I grew up in the suburbs. I wanted for nothing, very privileged, middle-class background that I have no shame in. My mum, my dad, 2 older brothers who were an absolute riot. Big house, lots of pets. It was great. I was a disabled child, but I didn't realize that until recently because I was never, treated as someone with a disability. I was just treated as Georgie, whose, eyes were a bit weird and her knees hurt a lot. That's how my parents went about it. And definitely having 2 older brothers was a good one because they don't see you any different. You're just still their little sister who's very, very irritating. And it was I think the best way to be brought up really because and also this was also, I mean, I'm 34 now. This was a long time ago. You didn't have the mental health charities and the support that my parents needed, not me. I went along with mum and dad said, and I got a present. I got a Barbie doll every time I had an eye surgery. So, it was awesome. I got a lot of attention. And they didn't have that sort of, help or support system. So they sort of did the best job they could. How do you explain to a little girl that, she's got the condition of an old woman and it's going to change, her life and every decision she makes will be based around it? You don't. You make their life as normal and as great as possible. And that's what my parents did.
So that's something, again, about formative years, because you always, and we'll come back to this later with the pandemic, but you always struck me from the first time I met you as appearing to be fairly secure with your identity, who you are, your integrity, what your values are, what your principles are. And how much do you think that is because of the firm foundations that your mum and dad and your brothers, but mainly your primary caregivers gave you in those early years, with all of the things that you went through?
It was all down to them. Don't get me wrong, they weren't perfect. They didn't get it right every time. But I certainly don't hold that against them or blame them for it. There's no easy way to handle what we were having to go through. And I am very close to all of them. I'm very grateful to them for instilling in me a sense of identity and purpose. And they didn't treat me as a victim or with any pity. They made it part of who I was. That made me unique, and they loved me for that, not despite it.
So there's a phrase that I've kind of read about and heard other people, that I've forgotten the name for that phenomenon where you, as soon as you learn something new, you then notice it everywhere and hear it everywhere. And that's been happening a lot in the last few months. One of those phrases is mirror science or mirror self. I don't know. Have you heard of the idea of mirror self?
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
What's new? Whenever we chat, just
yeah.
So mirror self is the idea, again, from formative development, where a baby looks to its caregivers to mirror back its value in the world, how it matters. So like the proper early newborn, like how important they are in the world, who they are. That doesn't have to necessarily be through sight, but it's through the mirroring, the actions, the attunement of caregivers around the baby. If for any reason that isn't fulfilled during those formative years, then don't worry, guys. There's no ghost behind Georgie. That was
just a caveat, guys. That's my partner. We live together, and there's also a cat who will appear. Don't worry. He just went racing up the hallway. He will make an appearance, and now he's just meowed.
I'm looking forward to seeing both of them again. I also had a moment of thinking that it was going to be a bit like that moment in Three Men and a Baby, where there's supposedly a ghost, except that it turns out actually it was a cardboard cutout that's standing in the doorway. Anyway, random tangent. Let's crack back onto what I was trying to say, which is the mirror self. So if for any reason that baby doesn't get that mirror self, then throughout their lifetime, they will be, even as adults, looking for that mirror self. And that might come from external validation through relationships and attachment disorders. There's 4 different primary types of attachment disorder that we might talk about later. If not, then again, join the Discord, and there's some information on the Discord about that. But you might also look for it from audiences, or from social media, or from this mirror science. So Facebook and Instagram, where we're constantly able to have ourselves projected back towards ourselves, and an idea of false value, potentially, that capitalist models can take advantage of if we want to. Quick moment to say that Baldy is well on it with the cat emotes, and anyone who wants to join in with emotes, if you subscribe, then you will get a Hopepunk emote. Georgie, mirror self. Ironically, although you're one of the most beautiful, physically beautiful, and internally beautiful people that I've ever met, you seem to not necessarily seek a mirror self in the same way that I've observed other people seeking mirror selves. Do you observe that about yourself? Do you feel like you're seeking yourself through external validation at all, or?
No, honestly. Maybe when I was younger, my 20s, when I was, as we all are in our 20s, a bit of a knobhead and not really knowing what direction I wanted to go in. I don't think I seek validation. I am deeply sensitive, though, to other people's energies and what they put out. I find myself absorbing a little bit and allowing it to affect my mood and my sort of how I'm feeling that day, or how I'm feeling about myself. And I found that tricky in the industry that we're in comedy and stand-up and in acting as well. You do get people who are constantly just putting out how they feel into the world without any thought of anyone else. And this sounds incredibly old-fashioned, but it does get on my nerves, that, because I find myself picking up on it, and then I'm feeling insecure for no good reason, because somebody's putting out their anxiety that is not my problem. So in that respect, I do. But in terms of a certain validation, certainly not anymore. Maybe through work, we want to make audiences laugh, or we want our work well received. But to me, that's a professional validation in order to pursue the career I want. However, in yourself when your work's good, or a gig goes well, or you've executed a play well, or a scene. So that difference is I'm very, very conscious of, and I make sure I take a sort of step back. However, a lot of this wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't gone and got some help a couple of years ago.
Yes, and I want to talk to you about that as well. Before I do, I'd like to just make a public apology to you, Georgie. I haven't, before doing this work on myself this year, where I've been more proactive in my therapy, I'm quite aware that I wasn't able to, I didn't have the tools required to emotionally regulate myself, and I'd quite often expect or want external people to soothe me for me rather than myself, and I wanted other people to regulate my emotions for me. So I think I need to apologise to you because from now on I'm very, very different, and I've got new tools, which means that whenever we hang out, hopefully there'll be better boundaries there. So therapy.
I would like to apologise, Julia, for while you were making that lovely apology. There's been so much background noise. Working from home, what are you going to do?
I love it. There's no background noise here because my life is empty. Oh no, comedy pushing the feelings away. We'll come on to that again later as well. Because yes, therapy, Georgie, because you had this condition in childhood. In your 20s, you spoke openly about how you lost sight in both your eyes as well. And then you've been in therapy more recently as well. I want to ask so many questions. The experience in your 20s, could you sum that up as beautifully and succinctly as you do on stage?
Sure. When I was 21, my one seeing eye went blind. They didn't quite know why it was related to the condition, and through the brilliance of medical science, they managed to patch it back up, and I got a fair amount of my sight back. To be more succinct, if you want to read more about it, I did a recent column in the Metro that talks about it and then goes on to talk about body positivity and all of that jazz. But that's the gist of it. And then I went about my 20s quite, I was a bit lost. It thrown off so many things. For someone who was always so determined and confident, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted and who I wanted to be. And then as I got later into my 20s, things did improve, actually. I went to drama school. I got into comedy. I made different friends and started to do well in those fields. But I was finding myself increasingly unhappy when I should have been happy. There were good things in my life. So a couple of friends, picked up on it and were surprised that I hadn't sought therapy throughout my life because of what I'd experienced with my disability. And I've always been a bit of a stiff upper lip person anyway, a bit of, just get on with it. And that I still believe in to some extent, but also you have to recognize when you hit a wall and you need to reach out. I never thought what I'd been through was trauma. It was just the hand I got dealt. It was just part of who I am, and that's it. There's no point dwelling on it or asking too many questions. I couldn't change it. But I was unhappy when I shouldn't have been, and I wasn't having that because life was good.
And that unhappiness, because I'm always fascinated with you, how firstly I love you, and secondly, well, I'm not fascinated by that because it's obvious why, but the differences, there's so many similarities that I see with you, but so many differences. Like, I now realize that with like things like when we first met, I remember you telling me that's your attitude towards the past experiences that you've had. And I was like, yeah, I totally agree that that's the hand you dealt, and then you live in the present and you move forward. But I now recognize that for me, that meant that I never really dealt with the feelings of the things that I went through, either as a child or a teen, or in my 20s, and learning to be fully present and fully engaged, not dissociating, not using unhealthy coping mechanisms, meant that that's a part of the recovery that I'm currently going through, which is new and weird because then I have to feel all the feelings that I don't want to feel. I think that sounds quite different to yours, like your experience of that unhappiness. Was it unhappiness that was related to the past, or?
Yeah, it was related to past experiences. So I found myself when my eye went haywire when I was 21, there was a couple of things it did beforehand, and I recall one of those things happening. Or I thought it was happening again. It wasn't that long ago, a couple of years ago, and I just lost my shit and couldn't separate the two. And I was so annoyed because it was that the sort of demons, I guess, it was ruining my day. And it was stopping me from getting on with my work and enjoying my life and my relationships. And I was like, this isn't, I'm not having this anymore. So I had to get it addressed. I was determined to put his demons to bed, basically. and found a way to sort of be proud of what I'd been through and not ashamed.
And had you been ashamed?
Yeah, I must have been. I don't think I realized I was, because I wasn't sort of talking about it, and I sort of had a sort of yeah, because I hid it in a lot of ways, and just down to like little things. So I'm wearing glasses right now. I have a contact lens, and I used to have these used to be much thicker, and I wouldn't let anyone see me in them. You know, what's that? How, you know, it's daft, but just little things like that, and it was dominating a side of my life. The best way to describe it is there was sort of two things fighting inside me: a sort of very dark, miserable, bitter little woman against the quite fun-loving, mischievous person I enjoy being, and the other was taking over, was just swallowing up, and I just wasn't enjoying life.
There's a thing I've learned about the three different selves in terms of trauma. I just want to ask if this rings truth from what you're saying. That there's the wounded child, who's the one that's vulnerable and doesn't want to be seen, is holds all the shame. Then there's the adaptive child, which is the child that's pretending to be an adult, but it's a construct of an adult, so might be overly critical, overly angry, pushing feelings away, trying to pretend to be an adult rather than fully embodying the authentic self and true self-leadership. And then there's the I've forgotten the term, but the proper adult, the adult that we become through healing wounds. I hate all these words, but I need to embrace them. And that's the adult that knows how to self-lead and knows how to self-soothe. Is that kind of what you were saying about the way that you were behaving? Was there any of that adaptive child that was trying to be an adult but actually was pretending to be?
I don't know about that, to be honest, mate. All I know is that I was putting on a front to the rest of the world that I was absolutely fine and coping, and I didn't need therapy. I refused to be physically and mentally disabled. That was my thinking. Incredibly unhealthy. I'm totally aware of all of this. And but there's another bit of me who had been through, I felt like I lost a lot of time because of my disability. I lose hours in waiting rooms, recovering from eye surgeries, not being able to move forward with my life. And I wasn't able, and for some reason, it all caught up with me. I was very nervous telling my parents I'd gone into therapy, not because of their attitude towards it, but because I didn't want to upset them. And I didn't want them to think for a moment they had done anything wrong, because they hadn't. But when I told them, they were obviously quality about it because they're good people. But I remember my dad saying, he said, well, you just must get to a point where, you know, you're in a room on your own and it's just closing in on you. And I said, it's exactly that. I was running out of tools to cope. That's the best way to describe it. I had no other way. I felt exhausted and just full up by it. So it was coming out in just generally being bloody miserable. And I didn't realize until I went into therapy how angry I was as well. It was very nice to just say out loud, this was really unfair. And I think of that little girl who got this dumped on her, and I was angry.
Anger is something that I think a lot of people struggle with in different ways. And I know for me, it's only been last week was a moment in therapy where I was actually able to vocalize anger that I'd held on to for years and denied for years. And closest kind of said, yes, I feel angry, but then I push it away. But last week it was like, I actually said it in the ugly, horrible, weird, shouty, cryy, snotty way that I wanted to and needed to for all those years. How do you handle and manage anger, Georgie? It's not easy. And has therapy given you those tools to manage it? Were you scared of being angry? That's about 5 questions in one.
I was definitely scared of being angry. I've always had a bad temper anyway. I was a very, very willful child, and I didn't quite spoil a lot of tantrums, but that was totally related to having to, be dragged to hospital appointments, have things done, and having no control or say. So I would literally throw my toys out the pram. And then as I got older, I didn't manage it, so I shut it right down. I revealed that temper a couple of times and nearly lost friends over it because it was so unpleasant. So I just shut it down completely. And I've always used humor to as a coping mechanism, which I don't see as the worst thing in the world, by the way. And I did that. And then when I went to therapy, we just dug in deep. And I just said it all out loud. But I was very conscious of the therapy. I didn't want to be in it forever. I wanted the tools. I wanted to walk away and get on with my life. I didn't want it to be a defining aspect of me, because it was enough to have to visit, 3 different clinics at Moorfields every couple of months. And as well, and there's also a disability. This is going off on a bit of a tangent. People forget, if you've got a physical disability, you've also got the other physical stuff as well that just come from being a human. I had a positive smear a couple of years back, so that had to be treated. I had kidney stones, these things, and that on top can really be a lot. So I didn't want to. I was very determined to almost do the best I could at it. But I wanted to deal with it very privately and professionally. I didn't want particularly the world to know until I was out the other side.
And why was that? Why did you want to keep it private?
It's no one's business in a lot of ways. I felt it would have been counterproductive to have had other people's opinions on my therapy and my experience and traumas as well as a therapist. It was to be dealt with professionally. That's what it required. And also when I went into therapy, it's a weird thing. So, you have these scars you carry. And it was a case of holding them with pride to the world. And I'm very guarded of my pain and trauma. It's mine. And in a way, I'm proud of it. I am now. I wouldn't have been a couple of years ago. I went through it. It makes me unique. It's not yours to toy with or question. And I'm very, very protective of it. And I didn't want anyone messing with it. It's mine to carry. So I find myself getting quite frustrated with certain aspects of social media, the way people talk about their traumas, their issues. I don't think it's always healthy. And I've also found in past experiences, when I've told people about what I've been through, they almost try and take it for themselves or interfere with it, and I just cannot bear it.
Yes, I'm tearing up a little bit. Boundaries, Georgie. I didn't really understand boundaries before this summer. It was a word that people chucked around, and I've read books about boundaries now, and I've understood why I didn't. I now understand why I didn't understand, and I now have more tools to recognize boundaries. Like I used to overshare all the time to anyone, a waiter, and some random person I meet on the bus. I'll just tell them anything to endear them to me, to endear myself to them, to feel not alone. And I thought that meant there was loads of connection in the world, but actually it was unhealthy, and it meant, for lots of reasons, I had porous boundaries with strangers, but also with people that I loved. And during lockdown, that meant that I really abused boundaries with the people, with the person that I was very close to, physical, intellectual, emotional boundaries. I think I've realized, hearing you talk, that's something that I've always admired about you, and I just didn't know that it had that word, was that you appear to have such healthy boundaries. Is that something that you were always raised with, or you're aware of, or is it just something that you have no idea that it's a thing?
I think I went on a bit of journey with it. I think I definitely overshared in unhealthy ways in my 20s when I wasn't at my best. And I didn't also give myself much time after I got my sight back to mentally deal with what I had just been through. I just went straight back into life because I was like, I'm not messing about anymore. I want to catch up because the world moved on without me and I wasn't having it. It wasn't until I got a bit older that I started to put healthy boundaries in place. And it might have been something that I was raised with. I was certainly instilled with good morals and a sense of right and wrong from my upbringing. But I think it's also something to do with this job. I don't mind, of course, I don't mind platforms like this where it is a healthy, safe way. You know, we all know why we're here. But I was giving, I think, so much of myself into, say, my shows and my work that I was concerned that there was so much of that going in, there wasn't anything of me left. It never got that far. I managed to nip it in the bud. So, for instance, my relationship I keep private. You're not going to see pictures of me and my partner on Instagram endlessly because that's not necessary. People should know what they need to about you, but also I don't need their validation. I want to know what they think. If they want to, get to know me, come and see, my work. I think boundaries are very important, and I think particularly from the pandemic as well, lines have gotten blurred. Social media can be a great place in lots of ways, but be very careful, I think, when you start putting yourself out there into it. It can exacerbate problems you already have.
That was something that I observed, I now recognise from earlier this year. So back in January, I felt like something broke, and then and I didn't really know what it was. It's that next lockdown, but something inside me was just like, I'm lost now. And from January to June, I just felt like I was scrabbling around with constantly trying to get that mirror self from social media, from trying to do Twitch streams without healthy boundaries, trying to constantly write new material without checking in with myself of what the narrative was that I was telling. And I've come off social media now, trying to, again, come back gradually with better boundaries. You've said that you feel social media you need to be wary of. You seem to also use it with really healthy boundaries. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what do you think the future is with social media for you personally or for the wider community, in terms of how we navigate it healthily?
Honestly, I think the cons outweigh the pros with social media, and I think it should go for a while. Honestly, it is. I try and think of the benefits of it. Any that I can think of. So, say raising awareness for a cause, sure, but it so often gets out of hand and the cause is lost.
Yeah.
It has stopped so many. It's a good for communication for people who say can't get out and about. And I want to keep it for that reason. However, it has got to be better monitored. Any idiot can join Twitter, say what they like, and it never comes back to them because you don't have to, link it back to who you are. There are some very simple things that could be put in place to make it a lot better. But I think it's and it's all well and good that you can go to, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world and say change these things. It's got to be individual responsibility as well. How we raise our kids and how we put ourselves out into the world. Because the people who think are doing good on social media are also a big part of the problem as well. And we all have to take a responsibility. My personal preference is I'm 34, so I didn't really get the social media thing until a bit later. And by that point, I felt almost a little bit like it was almost moving too fast for me. And I'm actually quite grateful for that because I'm not reliant on it and I don't identify myself through it like I think younger generations do. Not everyone. I know there's some who don't. So I use it for professional. It's a good use of marketing. And then I'm pretty much out. That's it. I also find it visually, particularly Twitter, quite hard work to look at, and on a phone as well. It just, for me, it doesn't come naturally to pick up and do a tweet. It's a faff. Is the best way to describe it. It's annoying. So you won't get a lot from me. And if anything, each week I will schedule I'll put in my diary, oh, make sure you tweet about this thing you wrote or this thing you're up to, in case it generates work. But absolutely, honestly, it's never really generated much work for me.
I think, I mean, there's also the education you mentioned, like having responsibility personally, but there's something about a helplessness if the technology is moving so quickly that you're putting in actions before you've even educated yourself about why it is you're putting those actions in. What need is that fulfilling in you, and why?
Absolutely, it's like, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
A lot of the time, I'm sorry to say, I think it's vanity for people. It's either vanity or validation, and you're going to find that it's never going to satisfy you.
No, and it's dissociation as well. Like, it takes us out of the present and out of the real world, and that I used to advocate for. I used to say, yeah, I used to defend it. I used to say, oh, it's really important to find connections with people who have similar experiences. It's like, well, yeah, but you can go do that at a yoga class, or at a dance class, or at a talk at a literary festival.
There was never for me that many problems with people feeling that they couldn't. I mean, unless it was something else. There are other ways to connect with people.
Yes, I agree.
And you're putting yourself at risk when you go out into them. But yeah, my opinion of social media is quite low in a lot of ways. However, I'm a hypocrite because I'm on it, but I would very, very quickly come off it first chance I get. I feel I am tied to it with work, but I'm not much good on it for work.
I mean, I'm currently off it. I'm currently off it, and for me, I'm worried that being off it means that maybe I'm not getting as much work as I would be. Like, even my one of my people I work with is like, oh, we're gonna if you tweet about this thing, put it out on social media, then maybe you're more likely to get the job. And I was like, well, I'm taking a social media break. And if I'm going to get the job, I'll get the job. Well, I didn't say this to them, but I hope I get the job because I'm good enough, not.
Well, exactly. There's very much a trend with comedians at the moment to be funny on social media, to just endlessly put jokes out throughout the day. That bugs me in so many ways, because firstly, it's a live art, stand up. So you put a big risk by putting something into text format. It can be very easily misconstrued. So I don't even touch that. Secondly, you're giving your stuff away for free, have some self-respect. And also, good work will speak for itself. All the comedians, writers, and actors who I admire and who are genuinely talented, it's not from social media. Don't get me wrong, there's some who are successes through it, but they're not ones that I consider very good.
So social media also has this thing of that you can hide behind it. You can hide your vulnerability, even from yourself. And I think I definitely did that, particularly during after lockdowns, trying to package it into this format of experience, strength, and hope, and making it into this lovely little story on Instagram of, here's some pretty pictures and here's a little story that will get loads of likes, because everybody is addicted to the rom-com nature of this little story that I put out there. And I hid from myself what I was actually feeling and what I was actually going through. And it also meant I neglected not only my own feelings of myself, but those around me and what they were really going through, constantly chasing that mirror self. So, Georgie, both on social media and in real life, during the pandemic, how have you been?
I came off social media during the pandemic for one of two reasons. I noticed very quickly into that first lockdown, if you were putting yourself in any way on it, it just seemed to be like loads of perverts and weirdos had taken to social media to find it. And I even found it through a WhatsApp group I was on of a sort of a neighborhood thing of our postcode. A creep on there started messaging me directly, being weird. And I was like, for the love of God, when you're feeling vulnerable anyway and scared because it was a bloody pandemic, on that. So I came off of that. And at the same time, my dad got a cancer diagnosis during the pandemic, the first lockdown, which is just, I was so annoyed. It's just like, come on, this couldn't, why now? He's fine, made an amazing recovery because they caught it early. And so between that and the idea of people being able to access me on social media and telling me they wanted to spaff on my face, I was like, you know what, I'll do myself a favor here. So I took myself out of it.
And did that have any effect on you that you could perceive, positive or negative?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Brilliant.
Facebook is a resource for me because a lot of gigs are booked on it. So I have that relationship with it. There were no gigs, so I don't need Facebook. Twitter, I'm not very good on anyway, so I was happy to just get rid of that. And Instagram, I think I deleted that as well because again, too fair. Instagram's probably my favorite because it's full of so much good cat and dog content that's enough to sustain it. And also you can make Instagram to your liking. So, and as opposed to Twitter, where you just, even if you don't follow somebody, I'm having to hear about them. It's like, why? I don't understand this. I don't want that. Well, then went, and it was incredibly beneficial. And it made me then, when I came back onto it, I readdressed my relationship with it. And I was like, right, this is for this is for that, this is for that.
Brief pause to welcome Garfield 99 UK who says good morning, Juliet and Georgie, and has called me Juliet and has called you Georgie Morrell by your full name. But I think that's probably because I've rewritten it in that way on our screens. Hello, Garfield 99 UK. Thanks for joining us. I mean, I follow you on all the social medias, but also because I do that because you're my friend, and I know that I can WhatsApp you and ask you how you actually are. And even though WhatsApp is also owned by Facebook, which is a problem, but whatever form it was, even if I should probably get your address so that I could send you a carrier pigeon. But if we all came off social media, I would track you down.
I just wouldn't worry. I don't really, your posts are a lot of the time to do with your career anyway. And it's like, well, I know what you're doing because we keep in touch. And as well with friends and things, it's like, if I came off all the social medias and I didn't keep in touch with somebody, sorry, you just didn't,
Yeah.
We're just not good at mates.
But you and I not only met up, we did a couple of Zooms, and we were in contact during the pandemic off of social media. And I knew about your dad, and I felt honored to know that you were going through that. A question that I haven't asked anyone else because it's not as relevant, because we didn't meet up, but you and I have. How much in person were you fully accessing what you were going through during the pandemic? Were you able to be fully present with all of the uncomfortable feelings?
I sort of had to be, really, because I was in therapy. And so I did, I got a referral from my GP, who was awesome, to the NHS service, iCope. Had my assessments and that. This is all before the pandemic. I think I got 8 sessions on the NHS with them and was recommended more, but I didn't have the money to pay for private therapy. So she recommended a service that does it based on your income, which is banging. So I sent my details off to them and they said, yep, you're on the waiting list, we'll be in touch. And then obviously they got clogged up more when the pandemic hit, but thankfully I managed to get in and started with another therapist for several months during that first lockdown. And I think it was about 6 months worth we did, maybe a bit less, until that therapist went on maternity leave. But it was good timing because we felt like I had, progressed well and she wasn't concerned about me leaving me to it. So throughout the pandemic, I was also doing therapy, which was just, if anything, it was actually a good thing because I could give it my time and energy. There's nothing else to do. And I was also able to get help with processing the pandemic as well. Not that I think I suffered any more than anyone else by any stretch. But we were able to sort of take that in when there were days and I was just like, I think I've got COVID, things like that. I didn't. Or I was worried about work and stuff. So yeah, it was an extraordinary time to do that, but I actually quite like it that way. It got more of my focus. My main concern with therapy when I went into it was that I was almost going to try and cheat it. I was going to treat it like I did at school, like, oh, let's just do this the easiest way possible, get the result and get out. And you just can't do that with therapy. You have to put in everything and get the most, and you'll get more out of it that way. So if anything, that was quite a blessing.
You say you can't do that, Georgie, but I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I've got a couple of jokes that I've mentioned a number of times where, like, I was sectioned under the Mental Health Act when I was 17. I've been diagnosed with 13 different mental health conditions. I've been in therapy for 20 years. I'm what psychiatrists might call a bit much. I love that joke, but Georgie, I've been in therapy for 20 years, and especially during the pandemic, I was doing phone therapy rather than Zoom therapy. I wasn't properly engaging. I was treating it like I was meeting up with a friend for a chat and a catch up. And all I did during the pandemic, to be honest, was because I was diagnosed with complex trauma just before the pandemic. So beginning of 2020, end of 2019. During the pandemic with these phone meetings, I'd say to my therapist after our chat, which may as well have been in a Wetherspoons pub, not that they were open, but other pubs are available. All I asked for every week was, oh, can you give me a mantra or an affirmation that I can write up on a post-it note and stick it on my mirror? And over the pandemic, my mirror got completely covered with these affirmations, which again turned into a joke, which was it worked wonders for my self-esteem because I couldn't see myself in my bathroom mirror.
Yeah.
But my then boyfriend, who was living with me during lockdown, because again I was too scared to be with just me and my flatmate, which was manipulative of me, to be honest, and not fair on anyone else. Not motivated out of love or being fully having integrity, but it was motivated out of me trying to hide from vulnerability, hide from taking responsibility. I was just being a child. But he couldn't even shave in the bathroom mirror because I'd covered it up with flipping affirmations that weren't going in anyway. It was things like, there was one that they did go in because I can remember them, but one about what's past isn't present. What was then isn't now. And it's like, well, that's great to just look at every day, but that's not the same as going into exploring and doing the hard work, the actual homework. And I've got so many books now since the relationship very sadly ended. I've thrown myself into actually doing the work, because I honestly, Georgie, I did cheat in therapy. I just turned up, box ticked, thought, right, done it, been a good girl, done my therapy. No, I didn't. I had a chat. And that's very different from having a proactive recovery. So I want to applaud you that you actually made the most of your time in therapy, doing therapy.
Yeah, no, I didn't want it to be a fixture in my life. It may be something I will have to go back to because I have a disability that is ever present, and it's a condition that will sort of do what it wants sometimes, which does not fill me with glee, but it is the Hannah and doubt. And I just, when I set my mind to something anyway, I'm gonna, do it. I like the idea of adventure and growing and moving forward. And that was another opportunity too. And it was one of the best decisions I made. I should have done it sooner.
I'm really glad that you're in that space as well, because I think if you enter into it willingly and with that attitude of, right, this is a short-term thing and I'm going to throw myself at this and make the most of it, then hopefully it's the right timing. It's all about timing sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously wasn't meant to be. It was interesting that it came at a time that I had some personal happiness, and also just getting into my 30s, you just get a bit wiser and a little bit more at ease with yourself. You don't quite care as much what people think. So it was, in that respect, it was well timed.
We've got the last 5 minutes. If anyone was watching has any questions, feel free to fire them away at us. I've still got a couple of questions for you though, mate. Sure. Like, I remember meeting up with you, I think it was probably April. We met up near the Tower Bridge, and I wrote a joke about it, about how I was so into the idea of, right, not going to judge anyone on their appearance. I was feeling miserable. I hadn't showered in a few days. I put on my I was quite proud of myself that I put on some earrings, tied my hair up, even though it was greasy as hell, and put my big thermal coat on and went to meet you. And you rocked up looking fucking amazing. You look like you stepped out of an All Saints video from when they were really fit. I mean, they still are fit, I'm sure. But you had like all the beautiful jewelry on, and this one of those tops that just looked like it just hung there out of like magic and tit tape. You know, it was just incredible.
Oh yeah, I know the one you mean.
You looked amazing, and yeah, it was that moment that I've been writing all the stuff about at the time about body confidence, and you know, if the pandemic has taught me to be body confident, because even if no one can see you, it doesn't matter. I don't need external validation. And then I saw you, and I was like, fuck, I wasn't making an effort for myself. But I realized now I was just comparing myself to you, and comparing my insides to your outsides. Did you feel great when we met up that day? You seemed great.
Yeah, totally. I love clothes and makeup and jewelry. I'm a big follower of fashion, not trends as such. Just I like the creativity of it, and the way you can express yourself and how well things are made. Me and my mum share that. So any opportunity to really indulge in it is I'm straight in. It's one of my favorite things to do. And also it's in armor. It's, you know, I trained as an actor. It's, you know, you can put a costume on and feel like this for a few minutes. I just think it's important that you don't rely on those things. And it's there as a bit of fun or something you enjoy. It's not there to impress the rest of the world. But if you are 10 years ago, I didn't think that. I wanted to, and the Metro article touches on it better, is that 10 years ago, I had a very different attitude to how I looked. I was obsessively trying to make everything perfect. And thankfully, you know, came out the other side from that. It took a trauma to get me there, but, you know, I did in the end. And I think that's how I approach it.
And thinking about outsides versus insides, in the run up to any time that you had difficult moments, like the properly hard times, do you think that there was any way that anyone around you could have seen, could tell from the outside that you were heading that way?
No, I'm a very talented actress. I hid it beautifully. And also, I didn't want to make it anyone else's problem. It wasn't for them to fix. It was up to me to do it. Everyone's got their own stuff to deal with. I had to take individual responsibility. And I also wanted to be the best I could for them as well. You know, I'm a good daughter. I'm a good friend. I'm a good girlfriend. And I wanted to be the best at those things. And it wasn't, and they didn't have to, I didn't want them to suffer with me. I've put my family through enough unknowingly. I wasn't going to go any further with that.
So let me flip that around as my final question before we're going to give all the social media details about how to follow you and all of that. When we met in April and when we were messaging ahead of June, end of June, beginning of July was when I had this forest fire of a breakdown. Were there any signs that you could see from what I was saying to you or how I was acting or behaving?
Yeah, totally. I'm not an idiot. Jesus. Yes. But I'm also always aware, not just with you, mate, but with anyone else. I know what I can help with and what I can't. And thankfully you've always been pretty proactive and you know yourself and know what you need. So I wasn't worried in that respect. I was concerned you were unhappy, and I didn't want that, you know, I don't want that for any of my mates or my loved ones. So, but you seem to always, you know, have control over it. I think you do yourself a disservice in that regard. You always seem to get on with it. But I'm not a trained therapist, so I knew there's only so much you can do.
Well, thank you. I'll take the compliment. I know myself a lot more now, having actually been proactive in the last few months, but I'm also very grateful to know you, and thank you for being such an amazing friend, and still being a consistent person in my life, because especially when you're going through difficult therapies, knowing what is consistent, including externally, but also internally, what feelings you have that are consistent. I have a lot of strength from that. Thank you so much, Georgie. You've been amazing. We've spoken for an hour about all kinds of stuff. Anyone who's watching now and wants to go back and watch more, please do. Georgie, where can people follow you?
On the social medias that I hardly ever use. All of them I'm at the G Morrell for Twitter and Instagram. Facebook don't bother with, because I'm no good on that. And those you'll find out, but also, you know, me and Juliet have the same agent as well, so, you know.
Yeah, and if we didn't see Hobbs the cat, but you might if you follow Georgie on Instagram. So
he's currently trying to climb the clothes horse. Oh, he's coming over. No, he's very busy today.
Yeah, well, I don't want to interrupt his day. Thank you for sparing an hour, Georgie. Anyone who's watching who wants to join us for more of these interviews, we are going to, the next one is on Monday, talking to John Salmon, who I spoke to yesterday in our preliminary pre-chat chat, and we are going to be chatting about some really interesting topics. So it's one I'm really looking forward to. It's 11 a.m. on Monday, the 8th of November, and then on Tuesday the 9th of November at midday we're talking to Suze Kempner about abusive parents. So I won't be talking, Suze will be talking a lot. I'll be asking questions. Georgie, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in person again soon. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody. I don't think we're going to do a raid today, but I'll see you all on Monday. Have a great day. Bye.